Welcome to the debate. Today, we are opening the sealed ash-covered records of the year 259 AC. We are unearthing what is, honestly, an apocalyptic, hidden horror of Westerosi history.
A history the world has actively tried to bury in silence.
Exactly. The tragedy of Summerhall. We're looking at King Aegon V, known as Aegon the Unlikely, alongside his fiercely loyal Lord Commander of the Kingsguard, the low-born Ser Duncan the Tall. So the central question we have to answer today is this. How does a king who spent his entire youth sleeping in the mud, eating hard bread, and bleeding alongside the poorest peasants of his realm, how does he end up burning his own family alive in a magic-fueled inferno?
It is a dark, dark mystery.
It really is. Now, representing the first perspective, my position today is that Aegon's actions at Summerhall, while absolutely terrifying in their ultimate outcome, were a justifiable and desperate political strategy enacted by a righteous king who was utterly cornered by a corrupt, rebellious nobility.
And taking the opposing view, I will argue that Aegon's noble intentions mutated into a dark, tyrannical obsession. To me, the tragedy of Summerhall is the ultimate, horrifying proof that the poison chalice of power inevitably corrupts even the purest of rulers.
Right.
I mean, good intentions do not justify opening a door to the literal apocalypse.
Well, to truly grasp the weight of this dark chapter, we have to look past the fairy tale of Aegon the Boy, We have to examine the tragic realpolitik of his reign as a man.
Which was incredibly bloody.
It was. Because this wasn't just a king who felt like passive pity for the small folk. He actively weaponized his royal authority to protect them. We are talking about sweeping, unprecedented legal reforms here.
Oh, absolutely.
He granted the peasantry new rights. He sent royal food shipments to starving villages during these brutal, endless winters. And, most controversially, he ruthlessly stripped power from abusive nobles.
Which is exactly what painted a massive target on his back. You have to understand the fundamental mechanics of Westerosi feudalism.
Right.
To the great houses, the Lannisters, the Baratheons, the Tyrells, a king who favors a peasant's word over a lord's right to rule is the very definition of a tyrant.
Yeah, they hated him for it.
They really did. They didn't see Aegon as a savior. They saw him as a radical who was dismantling their entire way of life.
Exactly. And because of that, Aegon faced constant, bloody, grinding rebellions throughout his entire time on the throne. I mean, every single time he tried to codify a protection for the weak, a lord would raise banners of revolt.
The realm was bleeding dry.
But it wasn't just the lords who failed him, right? His grand political strategy relied on marriage alliances to bind these angry great houses to the crown. And what happened?
Oh, his kids?
Yes, his own children systematically broke every single arranged political marriage for love. Duncan the Small threw away the crown for a mysterious woods witch named Jenny of Oldstones.
Jaehaerys and Shara eloped with each other.
Right, and Daeron refused to marry Olenna Tyrell.
It was just a cascading failure of diplomacy across the board.
It shattered the very alliances he desperately needed to keep the peace. Suddenly, the Baratheons are in open rebellion. The realm is bleeding. Aegon realized that conventional politics were just dead. He realized he needed the ultimate weapon of mass destruction, dragons, to enforce his righteous laws. His resort to ancient Valyrian lore wasn't madness.
You don't think so?
No, it was a necessary gamble to save the innocent. I see why you think that, but let me give you a different perspective. This wasn't tyranny. This was a monarch attempting to break the wheel of feudal oppression the only way he could, because the system itself was fundamentally broken.
I'm sorry, but I just don't buy that. Let me tell you why. Look, seeking a political weapon or a military advantage, that is standard statecraft. Gathering armies, forging new alliances, that is statecraft. But look at the sheer apocalyptic scale of the atrocity he orchestrated in the name of this necessary gamble.
Well, it went wrong, obviously.
Terribly wrong. I completely acknowledge his golden age beginnings. Aegon was the boy who wandered the dusty backroads, the squire who learned what it meant to be a true knight from Ser Duncan the Tall. But his political desperation led him to abandon all of those teachings.
I mean, he was out of options.
But look at what he did. In 259 AC, under the guise of celebrating the impending birth of his first great-grandchild, Aegon gathered his closest friends and family at the sunlit pleasure palace of Summerhall.
A joyous family reunion.
Or so they thought. What did Aegon actually bring into that palace? Pyromancers from the Alchemists Guild, 7 petrified dragon eggs, and, this is the most chilling part, highly volatile jars of emerald green wildfire.
Which is basically liquid magic.
Exactly. A king who brings the literal ingredients for a localized apocalypse into a maternity ward, resorting to dark magic and volatile dragons to force his lords into submission, is no longer a protector. He has crossed the Rubicon into tyranny. The moment you decide that unleashing ancient terror upon your populace is the only way to save them, you have lost your soul.
But wait. Let's dig into the mechanics of that deterrence for a moment. I have a specific question for you. If you were a king trying to protect the weak and the powerful lords kept bleeding your kingdom dry despite your laws, would you let your righteous reforms die, or would you seek a weapon to enforce them?
Because what is your alternative? Decades of endless war? If Aegon simply lets the highborn lords rebel, thousands of peasants die in the very mud he used to sleep in.
Yes, but the cost.
He saw the shadowy, faceless lords looming over his throne, ready to tear his life's work to pieces. Aegon didn't want to use dragons to mass murder innocent people. He wanted the absolute threat of dragons to keep the corrupt lords in check. Think of it like a modern leader holding a detonator to a nuclear weapon.
A nuclear weapon?
Yes, the goal isn't to push the button. The goal is to make sure your enemies know you have it. It's the ultimate form of deterrence.
Okay, that is a fascinating analogy, but it completely falls apart when you look at the nature of the weapon itself. Deterrence relies entirely on control.
Sure.
You can't call it deterrence when the weapon you were trying to build is inherently uncontrollable magic that instantly vaporizes your own family. By trying to wield these terrifying elements, Aegon proved that his obsession had blinded him to the actual mechanics of what he was doing.
He thought he had control.
But he didn't. Magic, especially Valyrian blood magic, is not a nuclear missile sitting safely in a silo. It is an unstable, hungry force.
That's an interesting point, though I would frame it differently. The instability of the magic is precisely why Aegon felt he had to oversee the ritual himself, in secret, far away from the capital of King's Landing.
Oh, so he hides it?
Right. He didn't want to risk the entire city.
But he risked his pregnant granddaughter. The failure of conventional politics drove him to the forbidden arts, yes, but we have to look at what Valyrian magic actually requires. The maesters at the Citadel have spent centuries trying to scrub this from the history books, but the lore hints at a horrifying reality.
Blood and fire.
Exactly. To wake a dragon from stone, you need fire and you need blood. Specifically, king's blood.
Which brings us to the actual descent into the ritual at Summerhall, because the accounts of that night are enough to chill the blood of anyone studying this era.
It's pure nightmare fuel.
Truly. Now, we don't have the exact step-by-step mechanics of the ritual because the surviving Valyrian lore is deliberately kept in the shadows. It's locked away, but we know the ingredients they were working with.
Right, let's look at those ingredients. Why wildfire? Why petrified eggs? A fossilized dragon egg is basically a rock. The theory suggests that Aegon believed the sheer, physics-defying heat of wildfire was the only thing capable of penetrating the stone and acting as an incubator.
Right. An artificial volcano?
Essentially, yes. But wildfire isn't normal fire. It doesn't just burn. It consumes everything, even burning on water. And then there is the blood aspect.
See, this is the part of the history where I always have to stop and ask, what was the actual plan? Do we truly believe Aegon intended to sacrifice a member of his own family to provide the king's blood?
It's a terrifying thought.
Or was the wildfire just a catalyst that burned out of control? I don't believe it was madness in the vein of his ancestors, like Maegor the Cruel or the Mad King Aerys. I believe it was a catastrophic accident born of immense, crushing desperation.
An accident.
Yeah. Perhaps a pyromancer mishandled the jar of the wildfire. Perhaps the ancient Valyrian texts they were translating from High Valyrian were fundamentally flawed. We don't know exactly what went wrong.
The intent almost doesn't matter when you look at the arrogance required to even attempt it. I mean, catastrophic is almost an understatement for the result. The historical records describe an unnatural roar of green and orange flames erupting so fast that people didn't even have time to run.
Just an instant inferno.
Yes. The fire they unleashed was hotter than anything the world had seen since the doom of Valyria itself. It didn't just burn the summer palace, it instantly consumed it. Stone pillars cracked, melted, and collapsed under the heat.
The sheer temperature is it's hard to fathom.
King Aegon the Unlikely burned to death. His eldest son, Prince Duncan the Small, burned to death. The agonizing screams of dying nobility echoed through the Dornish marches.
But the tragedy, the core tragedy here, is that right up until the moment the flames consumed him, Aegon truly believed he was at the precipice of a miracle. He thought he was about to hatch dragons and save the Seven Kingdoms.
See, I come at it from a different way. He thought he could master the very forces that destroyed the greatest, most magically advanced empire in human history. The Valyrian freehold was annihilated by its own magic, yet Aegon thought he could domesticate it in a summer palace.
Well, he was desperate.
Desperate, sure, but look at the cost. The screaming figures trying to flee as emerald green fire devoured the halls. It is a horrific testament to the dangers of esoteric knowledge. This wasn't a tragic miscalculation of statecraft. This was a fatal obsession that crossed the line into fundamental insanity. To ignite wildfire in a confined space filled with your loved ones is madness.
It is horrific, I agree. But out of this horrifying self-inflicted disaster, however, emerges a twist that shapes the entire future of their world.
The prophecy?
Yes, a piece of hidden lore that absolutely blows my mind every single time I examine it, because it reveals that Summerhall wasn't just the end of a reign. It was the brutal fulcrum of a prophecy.
Oh, absolutely. When we comb through these forbidden histories, we uncover just a mind-blowing connection.
Right, so to understand it, we actually have to look back decades earlier. This is the part of the history that always trips me up. Let's look at the prophecy of Aegon's eldest brother, Daeron the Drunken, at the tourney of Ashford.
A long time before the fire.
Right. Daeron had these powerful, prophetic dragon dreams. He dreamed that a great dragon would fall dead, but that Ser Duncan the Tall, the lowly hedge knight, would survive.
Right. And at the time, literally everyone in the realm assumed the dragon in the prophecy was Prince Baelor Breakspear, who tragically died at that very tournament.
But prophecy in Westeros is a tricky, multi-layered beast. It rarely means what people think it means in the moment. The great dragon who fell wasn't Baelor.
The great dragon was King Aegon himself at Summerhall.
Exactly. And as the roof of the burning palace caved in, as the emerald flames melted the stone around them, Ser Duncan the Tall faced his final epic test.
Oh, this part is incredible.
I want you to picture the sheer cinematic horror and heroism of this scene, because it is the climax of the greatest friendship in Westerosi history. This massive knight, nearly 7 feet tall, draped in the pure white cloak of the Kingsguard, watching his best friend, his king, burn alive.
And he can't stop it.
He couldn't save Aegon. The magic had already consumed him. But Dunk did exactly what he had sworn to do his entire life from his days in the slums of Flea Bottom. He protected the weak.
The imagery of those final moments is just staggering. The historical fragments paint this towering silhouette emerging from the green inferno. His white Kingsguard cloak is literally on fire.
It gives me chills.
And he is carrying a screaming, pregnant woman princess, Rhaegar Targaryen, Aegon's granddaughter. Dunk uses his massive body to physically shield her from the heat, carving a brutal path through an inferno that is melting the very architecture around them.
He sacrifices his own life to do it. He gets Rhaegar out into the courtyard just before the castle completely collapses upon him.
A true knight to the very end.
Dunk perishes physically. He burns alongside his king, but his actions allow a new dragon to live. Because outside that burning pleasure palace, amidst the suffocating smoke, the salt of her own tears, and the falling ash of her family, Rhaegar goes into premature labor.
Which brings us to the massive, spicy plot twist of its entire era. Rhaegar gives birth to Prince Rhaegar Targaryen right there in the ruins.
Now, a casual historian might look at this and just see a tragic, untimely birth in a terrible place, a dark coincidence.
But I'm not convinced by that line of reasoning at all, because the symbolic and prophetic weight of the mechanics here are undeniable. Consider the ancient apocalyptic prophecy of Azor Ahai, the prince that was promised, the savior destined to defeat the darkness.
Right.
The prophecy explicitly states this savior must be born amidst smoke and salt, beneath a bleeding star.
The mechanics align perfectly. Rhaegar Targaryen was born amidst the suffocating smoke of burning Summerhall and the literal salt of Rhaella's tears.
And the bleeding star? I mean, how does a star bleed at Summerhall?
Ser Duncan the Tall, his personal coat of arms, his sigil was a shooting star.
Exactly. By sacrificing himself drenched in his own blood and the fire of Summerhall, Dunk became the literal and metaphorical bleeding star that heralded Rhaegar's birth.
Wow.
If Dunk the Lunk, this lowly orphan from the poorest slums of King's Landing, had not been there to act as a human shield for Rhaella, Rhaegar Targaryen would never have been born.
It is a stunning realization when you trace the bloodlines forward.
Without Rhaegar, the entire sequence of events that triggers Robert's rebellion never happens. Daenerys Targaryen would never have been born. Jon Snow would never have been born. The entire Song of Ice and Fire, the entire fate of Westeros facing the apocalyptic threat of the White Walkers in the Long Winter, hinged entirely on the physical bravery of a single, lowly hedge knight who chose to save one innocent woman while the world burned around him.
It's brilliant and it's deeply haunting. It completely recontextualizes the tragedy. But even with that incredible revelation, when we pull back and look at the ashes of 259 AC, I remain firm in my assessment of Aegon the Unlikely.
Fair enough.
He became consumed by the very darkness he tried to wield. You cannot use the tools of an apocalypse to enforce peace. Summerhall is the ultimate proof that good intentions, when married to absolute power and esoteric dark magic, create the most devastating catastrophes. The fire didn't just burn his political enemies, it consumed his entire legacy. He wanted to be the shield of his people, but he died the spark of their destruction.
I hear that. I still see him as a deeply tragic hero, though. Aegon was crushed by the impossible weight of ruling a broken, corrupt feudal system that refused to be fixed by law or reason.
It certainly refused to be fixed easily.
He sought a miraculous, magical solution because human politics had utterly failed him. And yes, he paid the ultimate horrifying price. The emotional toll of this event rippled across the entire world. Think of the towering, icy expanse of the wall in the far north.
Oh, Maester Aemon.
Yes. When word of the tragedy of Summerhall finally reached the Night's Watch, it reached blind, ancient Maester Aemon Targaryen, Aegon's older brother.
Aegon had willingly given up the crown so Aegon could rule.
Exactly. And upon hearing that his beloved little brother had burned to death in a magical inferno, Aemon was absolutely devastated. His final heartbreaking words on his own deathbed years later echo through the history books. Aeg, I dreamed that I was old.
God, it is agonizing. It really proves that in the brutal history of Westeros, even the best of intentions, the purest of hearts, are ultimately punished by fire. The Game of Thrones demands a toll, and Aegon paid it with his family's flesh.
True. Yet, the flames of Summerhall did not consume absolutely everything. They took King Aegon, they took Prince Duncan, they took Ser Duncan the Tall's life, but they did not consume his legacy. Which leaves us with one final dangerous secret to uncover from the ashes.
Yes, this is perhaps the most heavily guarded secret of all. As a sworn brother, and indeed the Lord Commander of the King's Guard, Ser Duncan took a sacred, unbreakable vow of absolute chastity. He was strictly forbidden by the laws of gods and men to take a wife or father children.
He was the paragon of knightly virtue.
Exactly. Yet the deep lore, the hidden tapestries of history, confirm that his bloodline somehow survived.
Wait, really?
Yes. Decades later, from the armories of history, we find a rusted shield bearing Dunk's distinct sigil, the elm tree and the shooting star.
Oh, wow.
And we know that his descendant, carrying his massive stature and his unbreakable sense of honor, is none other than Brienne of Tarth, the greatest female warrior Westeros has ever seen.
It completely upends everything we know about his final years. I mean, the history of Westeros is written in blood, fire, and hidden betrayals. The truth is often stranger and much darker than the polished songs would have us believe.
So true.
How did a celibate Kingsguard knight leave behind a descendant? Did the honorable Ser Duncan the Tall, the man who sacrificed his own life to save the royal bloodline, break his most sacred vow in secret?
It's a massive question.
And how did his forbidden, hidden bloodline eventually end up forging such an extraordinary warrior on the Sapphire Isle of Tarth?
The answers, like so much of this era, remain buried deep in the ash of Summerhall.
So we leave you to ponder the flames. Imagine the purest, most compassionate king to ever sit the Iron Throne, driven to unleash an inferno that changed the world forever. Was it a desperate, necessary sacrifice to save the realm, or the ultimate, horrifying corruption of power?